Coming up today, a critical week ahead in the effort to contain the outbreak of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome in Korea as authorities confirm 3 more cases overnight, bringing the total to 18. A Japanese delegation led by a former Prime Minister is in Seoul in an attempt to smooth relations between the two countries. This, as a poll shows, most Japanese want their government to show remorse for Japan's wartime atrocities. First, bad news for Korea's exporters as outbound shipments tumble almost 11% on year in May. Imports were sharply down last month as well. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 1st of June. You're tuned into our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks as always for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we begin our newscast with the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak that has many people in and out of Korea very concerned. 3 more cases have been confirmed overnight, so now the tally stands at 18. For more, we connect with our Han Daeun standing by at the news centre. Daeun, fill us in.
Mark, at this point, the best news is that all confirmed cases are secondary infections from the first patient. According to Korea's Ministry of Health and Welfare, 2 of the 3 most recent patients stayed in the same hospital ward as the first patient. The third is the son of a patient from the same hospital whose case was confirmed earlier. They're all over the age of 40 and were in quarantine, 2 of them at a designated hospital and the other at home. Of the 18 confirmed patients, 1 is in critical condition, while 5 are considered unstable. Meanwhile, a Korean soldier who was taken to an isolation ward on Sunday has tested negative. Mark?
And Dan, what about this patient quarantined in China? How's he doing, and what measures are the Chinese authorities taking?
Well, he initially seemed to be doing quite well after being taken to a hospital in Guangdong province, but China's Xinhua news agency reported Monday his condition has deteriorated after he developed a high fever. More doctors have been sent to the hospital in Huizhou City to aid with his treatment. Chinese health officials have isolated some 64 people who came in contact with him, but are having trouble tracing more than 10 people who boarded the buses he took to Guangdong. And Mark, before I go, Korea's welfare ministry has said this week will be critical because the 14-day incubation period from the first patient is now up. So we'll see if MERS spreads or stops here in Korea. Ministry officials have vowed to pursue all government and civil level efforts to prevent tertiary infections. But, Mark, that sort of comment may not be enough to calm public fear and anger over the government's tardy and inefficient initial response to MERS. Back to you.
Now, in other news, President Park Geun-hye says her administration will not accept revisions to the National Assembly bill that gives Parliament the power to request changes to presidential orders. At a meeting of her senior secretaries on this Monday, President Park expressed concerns that such power would negatively affect her policy objectives and paralyze the administration's ability to run state affairs. The president added the public and the economy would ultimately pay the price. Her remarks indicate that she may veto the bill if the parties do not review it. As for the case of this MERS scare here in Korea, the president called on the country's health authorities to contain the virus and to inform the public on ways to prevent further infections. The confirmation hearing for Korea's Prime Minister nominee, pension reform and economy-related bills look set to dominate June's extraordinary session at the National Assembly. The deputy floor leaders of the 2 main rival parties will confirm the session's detailed schedule later today. Topping the agenda is the confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Hwang Kyo-an. The ruling Saenuri Party hopes to conclude the confirmation process before June 14th, which is when President Park Geun-hye departs on a state visit to the United States. However, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has vowed to carefully assess Hwang's credentials, saying it may take time to find out if he's fit to be Prime Minister. Follow-up discussions on pension reform and strengthening the national pension system are also likely to be the subject of heated discussions at the Assembly. Korea's health minister has vowed to take appropriate measures in light of revelations the United States mistakenly sent a live anthrax sample to a U.S. airbase here in Korea. Meeting with ruling party lawmakers and government officials on Monday, Moon Hyung-pyo promised to track down any civilians and/or military personnel who may have been exposed to the highly dangerous bacteria. He said ensuring the safety of the Korean people was the government's top priority, but stressed there was no risk to the public. The Korean government is sharing its probe results with the US government. Now, the Pentagon says the live sample, which was sent to Osan Air Base south of Seoul, was safely destroyed upon detection. Calls are growing around the world and in Japan itself for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to issue a genuinely sincere apology for his country's wartime atrocities in his forthcoming statement to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. According to a survey by Kyodo News Agency over the weekend, 55% of respondents said Abe should include key words such as remorse and apology in the statement to acknowledge people in other Asian countries, including Korea, that were victimized so terribly by Japan's colonial rule and aggression. Now, this figure is 4 percentage points higher than a similar survey conducted back in late April. Now, on the controversial security legislation to expand the role of Japan's self-defense forces overseas, the survey showed the vast majority of the Japanese public, 68%, said the bills, if passed, would increase the chance of its military forces being dragged into war. A group of former officials from Korea and Japan held talks in Seoul on Monday morning as they seek to break the ice between the two countries. The representatives include former Korean Prime Minister Lee Hong-gu and former Japanese Prime Minister Yoshiro Mori. The visiting Japanese delegation are currently holding a lunch meeting with Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, and after that they'll pay a courtesy call to President Park Geun-hye. The Korean and Japanese representatives are also scheduled to hold a press conference this afternoon, and this is their second meeting so far this year. The two sides last met in Tokyo in March. Now, while the UN Security Council is looking into North Korea's recent claim that it test-fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile, Pyongyang has lodged a request of its own. The regime's ambassador to the UN is pushing the Council to address the joint South Korea-US military drills, characterized by the North as a rehearsal for war. Our Connie Kim reports.
Failure to hold an emergency meeting to address the South Korea-US joint military exercises would prove the Council is Washington's political tool. That's what Cha Sung-nam, the North Korean ambassador to the UN, wrote to the Security Council last week, according to the UN website on Sunday. Cha's letter went on to say its SLBM test firing was a legitimate form of deterrence against military threats posed by the annual joint drills. The U.S. recently asked the Council to investigate that test firing on the grounds that it could be a violation of UN resolutions banning the regime from carrying out any ballistic missile activities. The South Korean-U.S. joint military exercises, Key Resolve and Full Legal, took place over March and April. Pyongyang called them a real nuclear war game, practice for North Korean invasion, and an effort to eliminate a North Korean leadership. However, multiple diplomatic sources in Washington say North Korea didn't respond to U.S. requests for talks in May following the joint military exercises. Sources say Washington is trying to create momentum for dialogue with Pyongyang before another set of South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises scheduled for August. But with the current conflict at the UN, dialogue is looking unlikely. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
China has let its concerns be known to South Korea about the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. A South Korean official says Admiral Sun Jen-guo, a senior figure in China's military, made Beijing's feelings very clear during talks on Sunday with Seoul's Defense Minister Han Min-gu in Singapore. The US has been pushing for the system called Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to be deployed to South Korea to better protect the country and American troops stationed here against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The official who was at the meeting said Han told the Chinese admiral that Seoul will make a decision based on South Korea's national interests. China is worried the deployment of a THAAD battery so close to its territory would threaten its national security and destabilize the region. Korea's exports tumbled by their fastest rate in nearly 6 years in May. The Trade Ministry says the country's overall outbound shipments last month slumped 10.9% from a year earlier to $42.4 billion. Now, that is the biggest drop since a 20.9% fall recorded in August 2009, at the height, really, of the global financial crisis. Exports have been slowing for 5 consecutive months now, due largely to low oil prices and slowing growth in China. Korea's trade surplus in May expanded, though, as imports shrank at an even faster rate. Imports plunged 15.3% on year to $36 billion, meaning Korea's trade surplus was $6.3 billion. And a recent study highlights changes in China and Japan as major factors causing that drop in Korean exports. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korea's competitiveness in the global export market has dipped, mainly due to China's technological advancement and unfavorable currency conditions. Citigroup research says China's technology made big improvements last year. In fact, the institute predicts China will be on par with Korea's advanced technology in less than a year and a half. The weakening Japanese yen is also putting a dent in Korea's price competitiveness as many export items overlap. The Korean won is now at 896.6 won against 100 yen, an appreciation of 11.6% on year. The yen is expected to depreciate further as Japan pursues policies to accelerate recovery and lower inflation prices. 22 out of 36 global financial institutions tracked by Bloomberg predict Japan will pursue additional quantitative easing measures later this year. To boost competitiveness, experts say Korea needs to advance into the Chinese consumer market with products that require innovative technology. The service sector is most promising, according to Hyundai Research Institute, and adds Korea needs to increase research and development investment in order to diversify its current pattern of trading intermediate materials and components, such as steel and machinery, to China. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The race is on for businesses to win new licenses to run duty-free shops in Seoul, with the deadline for applications ending on this Monday. 2 licenses will be handed out to large companies and 1 to a mid-sized firm when the Korea Customs Service announces its final decision in July. So far, 7 large firms and 8 mid-sized businesses have submitted their applications. The government body said it will consider several qualifications, including management ability, efforts to grow with other local firms, and commitment to social contribution. Experts project a new duty-free shop in the capital would generate sales of almost $900 million a year and some $90 million in profits. Now, drones are taking off here in Korea, with more people flying these unmanned aerial vehicles for personal enjoyment, but the fun stops when they unknowingly break the country's drone laws. For more on the flying regulations and what happens when you break them, our Hwon Ji-hyun reports.
Flying drones can be an innocent hobby, but the miniature aircraft can pose a threat to people's privacy and safety, especially without proper supervision. According to Korea's Transportation Ministry, the number of illegal drone incidents jumped from 10 cases in 2012 to 49 last year, mainly because people aren't aware of Korea's drone laws. The flying regulations apply to all types of drones, both private and commercial, regardless of their size. And to ensure civilians fly their drones responsibly, the government is reiterating the following guidelines. By law, drones are not allowed to fly at night between sunset and dawn. The ban also applies to certain places, such as close to airfields or crowded venues. And to fly drones in restricted zones like the DMZ, you need a formal approval from the government. The law also stresses that the aircraft operator must be completely sober and the drone must remain in the pilot's sight at all times. Authorities have warned that operators who break any of these rules will be fined up to $1,800, and flying a commercial drone without a proper permit will incur heavier penalties, such as a 1-year prison term or a $27,000 fine. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we've been following on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, and do download our smartphone application for the latest news and programs. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.